we are actually slowly moving away from the NCDs and other responsibilities. It was not purposeful, but the COVID was coming in such a big way that we have been shifted our focus onto COVID. And in a way, we did well. And now we have also recognized that most of the comorbidities and problems associated with COVID was also due to people having non-communicable diseases, especially diabetes, hypertension, and its complications. Yesterday, we have discussed what is the importance of understanding blood pressure, how we should be recording blood pressure, documentation, what are the basic minimum investigations we are expected to do, and how we are supposed to communicate with the patients about the hypertension management details. And now, actually, we are going into the treatment part. Okay. So this is also very important in the sense that this is something we have been doing for quite some time. No one can escape from treating a diabetic patient or hypertensive patient, because wherever we are, whatever the specialty, whatever the hospital we work, we will be seeing these patients. So we have to be better equipped in understanding and managing these problems. So this is the second part of this session, and we have already discussed the first part, and now we are moving on to the second day. Okay, so today we are primarily focusing on treatment. And whatever questions, whatever comments, and whatever observations or your experiences, we can discuss after the presentation, and it is always welcome so that we could improve our patient care. Ultimately, this is all for the betterment of the patient and betterment of the society as such. So the treatment includes, this is something we have actually started moving on to the treatment aspects. So we have emphasized the importance of non-pharmacological therapy, hypertension clinic, NCD clinic, or any OPD where we see the hypertensive patients is more than just recording blood pressure and noting down some drugs. So we have a lot more to see that the patient adhere to the non-pharmacological therapy, lifestyle modification. We must emphasize the importance of moderate dietary restriction, weight loss, avoid excess alcohol, and they don't have to restart alcohol for moderate alcohol consumption. So there is a wrong message somehow going in. It's all for those who are having excess alcohol to cut down the alcohol consumption. And we need to go with aerobic exercise, regular exercise. And exercise should be incorporated into their regular lifestyle activities, and they should be choosing an exercise which they feel they will be able to continue and they will be enjoying to do it. Smoking cessation is very, very important. And if the person has not having diabetes, in our program also we are seeing every patient above 18 years annually, and we need to advise appropriately. The lifestyle changes can be followed up by any person above 18 years, and the weight reduction and all will help them. But annually we need to see that this patient is developing hypertension. And if the person is well controlled and person who is not adequately controlled, how we are going to monitor, I will be discussing. So this is something I have shown yesterday also. I might be showing once more, but because this is a very important slide, we have to advise them on all these things. Reduce salt consumption, choose a healthy diet, limit alcohol, don't smoke, maintain healthy weight, and exercise daily. So this is what we have been advising on the hypertension management. And secondly, I will be showing this slide also, because this is also very important, how to get a blood pressure. Not to talk, support arm, put the cuff correctly, sit, support feet, do not cross legs, have an empty bladder, support back, so all these things. And you have to use a validator blood pressure instrument. So this is something we should be looking, and if somebody else is helping us in checking the blood pressure, always make sure that they are doing it properly. We have seen blood pressure apparatus in many of the hospitals where this gives the same blood pressure apparatus. One time on the same person gives 160, 100, then 140, 90, the cuff may not cannot be inflated above a certain level. So all sorts of problems are there. And though we have so much of instruments and technology advances, still, well, only one thing that we always find it difficult is to find out a good blood pressure apparatus. So we need to emphasize this aspect as well. So now to discuss about the management, when to begin antihypertensive medications. All uncomplicated persons with high blood pressure, that is more than 140 or more than 90, either of it, if it is high, we can initiate treatment. But in diabetes or chronic kidney disease, we would prefer to have a blood pressure less than 130 by 80 if the patient can tolerate it without any complications. That means if the patient is not going into postural giddiness, postural fall, or some other problems with the lower blood pressure, but we preferred target is less than 130 by 80. Heart failure or congestive coronary heart disease, persistently less than 130 by 80. So there are evidences to prove that if we achieve the target blood pressure, the outcome is better, the long-term problems are less, so we need to emphasize this. So this is only to revise what we have been discussing. This is the optimal blood pressure. This is the normal blood pressure. And high normal, we can see this two are to be less than 130 by 80, but high normal, any of this is high, we call it as high normal. And this is the classification, stage 1, stage 2, stage 3 is more than 180 and more than 110. And isolated systolic hypertension is systolic blood pressure more than 140, but diastolic always less than 90. This is always seen in elderly. So these are all we have discussed yesterday. Now we move on to the treatment proper. We need to know that which antihypertensive drug we should be starting. This is a question we usually come across. Which will be the best drug for me? Which drug has got longer duration complications, lower the risk of complications? We know that roughly equally effective in lowering the BP. Actually, the benefit is more due to the blood pressure control more than the drug itself. And we know that there is wide interpatient variability. And we know that sometimes one patient responding very well to amlodipine, but when we switch on to ACE-ARB, angiotensin converting enzyme inhibitor, enalapril group, or the angiotensin receptor blockers like losartan, telmisartan group, may not fare with the ACE-ARBs, or they may not fare with the calcium channel blocker. So there is a wide interpatient variability is there. And few clinical parameters that reliably predict the individual responses to one drug. We cannot say which patient will respond to which drug, but there are definite indications where we choose one particular drug in certain patients. So what is more important is the amount of BP reduction. It's the major determinant of reduction in cardiovascular risk in both younger and older patients with hypertension. And it's more with the amount of blood pressure control that we achieve than the choice of antihypertensive drug. But there are specific indications for a particular drug. Suppose the patient has got arrhythmia, atrial fibrillation, heart failure, we will be choosing beta blocker. But otherwise, beta blocker is not the first drug. In a cardiac failure, our first choice may be diuretic. So we will see to it. But what is more important as far as overall, the blood pressure reduction is more important. How far the patient's blood pressure is lowered, how far the patient's blood pressure is within the normal range within the 24 hours of the day, that is more important. So which are the common antihypertensive medications that we have? We know that thiazides and thiazide-like diuretics, they have been in the mainstay. Thiazides, the thiazide, that is hydrochlorothiazide, dose is 12.5 to a maximum of 25 milligram per day. Thiazide-like diuretics, we know that chlorthalidone dose is 12.5 to 25 milligram per day. Intapamide 1.25 to 5 milligram per day. We know that chlorthalidone and intapamide are thiazide-like diuretics, and these drugs have a longer duration of action compared to thiazides as such. And most of the studies are done using chlorthalidone, and there is no head-to-head comparison between thiazide and chlorthalidone. Chlorthalidone is associated with somewhat greater risk of hypokalemia, glucose intolerance, new onset diabetes than hydrochlorothiazide. And we know that there are many combination pills available in the market of hydrochlorothiazide and chlorthalidone with ACI ACE inhibitors, calcium channel blockers, ARBs, all these are currently available. That is the combination therapy drugs are also available with the diuretics. So whenever we start treatment with mild hypertension, we need to start with monotherapy. But in patients with more than 20 by 10 millimeter above the goal, initial combination therapy using drugs is also recommended. Suppose the patient has got a blood pressure more than 160 by 110. We can think of starting combination therapy also, especially if the patient is having or remaining uncontrolled for quite some time. But in otherwise, in a mild hypertension, we always prefer to use a monotherapy in these patients. And which drugs, clinical reason to take a specific drug or drugs, non-dihydropyridine calcium channel blocker or beta blocker for rate control. Like if the patient has got atrial fibrillation with fast ventricular rate, patient is very anxious, all the with the palpitation and all those things, we would prefer a beta blocker or non-dihydropyridine calcium channel blocker, that is diltiazem and verapamil. But beta blockers are otherwise not commonly used for initial monotherapy in the absence of a specific indication. So young hypertensive whites, there are some specific reasons why we choose this drug in this class of patients. So depending upon age and race, there is some observations. Young hypertensive, this is from the in Western literature, that's why it's put as whites and black patients. Whites, ACE inhibitors and beta blockers are better than the calcium channel blocker or diuretic. But black patients and older adults, that is age more than 60 years, always they better respond to thiazide or long-acting calcium channel blocker. But in patients with diabetes, in patient with post-myocardial infarction, if the patient has got chronic proteinuria, chronic kidney disease, even in elderly more than 60 years, we will be starting on an ACE inhibitor or ARB because they are better in these specific indications. But in the absence of such specific indications, we can use any of these drugs as the reasonable initial drugs. And then once we see that this patient is not responding to this particular drug, and we are not very sure this patient is so keen to continue, and even reaching the maximum dose is not responding to it, enalapril or angiotensin receptor blocker, we can switch to calcium channel blocker, or we can add calcium channel blocker to the drug. So there are many options how we can modify the treatment. And when we coming to the angiotensin converting enzyme inhibitors, they are the preferred first line of in all patients who have heart failure, LV systolic dysfunction, all patients who had an ST elevation MI, those who had a non-ST elevation MI, and those who have diabetes, those who have proteinuric CKD. So on all those comorbidities, the most preferred drug is always an angiotensin converting enzyme inhibitor. So where do we use ARBs? In all the indications where I have mentioned, heart failure, myocardial infarction, ST elevation MI, non-ST elevation MI, all these situations, ACE inhibitors are more preferred, but we can use them. ARBs can also be used in those indications, especially in proteinuric chronic kidney disease. But it is also a choice in patients who do not tolerate ACE inhibitors primarily because of cough. So if you have to stop a drug, ACE inhibitor due to cough, always we switch over to ARBs because it covers most of the that special indications we have already discussed. Hypertension and osteoporosis. If monotherapy is appropriate, we can think of starting thiazide-like diuretics because it has an advantage over calcium reabsorption. By its action itself, there is a calcium reabsorption. So when an elderly patient osteoporosis, if you want to retain calcium, maybe you can think of using thiazide diuretics. And so it has in that way, and there is some amount of volume control as well. So that is why in heart failure, thiazide diuretics always a preferred drug. Calcium channel blockers, I have already said verapamil and diltiazem we can use in patients with atrial fibrillation. But it also preferred in patients with chronic obstructive airway disease. We don't want a beta blocker to be used. And in some special indications, like if you would like to use calcium channel blockers as a vasodilator therapy, all those situations we can consider. And this we have already seen. These are the specific indications for beta blockers. I have already discussed beta blockers are not the first line of drugs for hypertension nowadays. This is not the monotherapy that we preferred as against what we used to do in earlier days. But definite indications are heart failure, post-myocardial infarction, angina pectoris, atrial fibrillation, atrial flutter, essential tremor, where the non-cardioselective beta blockers are used. Hypothyroidism, migraine, when all these things come in a hypertensive patients, even if we don't prefer beta blockers as the first line in a usual patient, we will be using beta blockers as the first line. So it is not to be used as first line therapy, particularly in patients over age 60 years, inferior protection against stroke risk and all-cause mortality. And we know that beta blockers are associated with impaired glucose tolerance test, and there is a risk of development of diabetes. So in all these situations, we will not be starting beta blockers as the initial drug. Okay. And we know that the alpha blockers, that is prazosin hydrochloride, it is not recommended for initial monotherapy, with the possible exception of older men with symptoms of prostatism and if they are not at high risk. So these are the some of the selected indications where we will consider, AC inhibitors and ARB, where we will be considering a beta blocker, where we will be considering a calcium channel blocker, alpha blockers. All these things we know. We need no thiazide diuretics. We know that it's if the patient has got cardiac failure, and it has got a calcium retaining property, so maybe beneficial in osteoporosis patients. All these things we know, but we should also know which are the specific contraindication where we should not be prescribing a particular drug. If there is history of angioedema, we should not be using an AC inhibitor. If there is bronchospasm, do not use beta blocker. Liver disease, you should not be using methyl-dopa. Pregnancy, or at risk of, or there is a chance of pregnancy, patient can develop for planning pregnancy. You should not be using AC inhibitors. ARB, renin inhibitors is not nowadays used, but AC inhibitors, ARB, we should never start. Though the guidelines say we can start any of the drugs, calcium channel blocker, AC inhibitors or ARB as the first line, we should not be using in a person who is likely to become pregnant, because that might cause teratogenicity, especially when the patient takes AC inhibitors or ARBs in the first trimester. So we should not be casually starting AC inhibitor or ARB in a pregnant person likely to become pregnant, or a young female planning pregnancy. Second or third degree heart block, do not use beta blocker, do not use verapamil, do not use diltiazem. All these are very, very important messages, and we have to remember it whenever we write a prescription. An adverse event, if the patient has got a particular comorbid condition, we should not be using this drug. Like depression, we would like to lead to avoid beta blockers, central alpha 2 agonists. Gout, loop or thiazide diuretic, there is hyperuricemia, so we will be not be using, the person has got gout. Hyperkalemia, we will not be using AC inhibitors, ARBs, or spironolactone like drugs. Hyponatremia, we have to be very careful when we prescribe a thiazide diuretic. Renovascular disease, we will usually avoid, especially if there is a bilateral renal artery stenosis and things like that. We will avoid AC and ARB, and will closely monitor the renal function when we use these drugs in renovascular disease. And we must also know that there are undesirable drug combinations. We know that there are many drug combinations currently available in the market. AC inhibitors plus hydrochlorothiazide, AC inhibitors plus chlorthalidone, beta blockers plus calcium channel blockers. Triple drug combinations are available, but we know that beta blockers and AC inhibitors are not a preferred combination. Beta blockers and centrally acting drugs are not preferred. Beta blockers, verapamil and diltiazem, all brings down the heart rate. So we have to be very careful. AC inhibitors and ARBs we should never combine. So two drugs from the same class. Suppose the patient has got on AC inhibitor, don't add another AC inhibitor. These are all common sense, but sometimes we forget. Patient will be already on enalapril and patient will be on lisinopril. So sometimes the drugs different persons write different drugs and patient combine these drugs, so these might happen in the prescription. So we have to be very, very careful on patients who are on multiple drugs. The prescription errors also can be a problem. Patient may be using same drug, same generic like telmisartan, but patient might have prescribed from different prescription, maybe from cardiology, nephrology, or from the treatment of diabetes, hypertension. So we have to be very, very careful. And this is also, I have put this similar slide in the yesterday's talk also. And when we have a patient not getting blood pressure control, we should ask whether the patient is on any NSAIDs, patient is on any over-the-counter drugs, which patient is on steroid for some other reason. NSAIDs decrease the efficacy of diuretics. Verapamil increases the blood levels of statin. Steroids can worsen diuretic-induced hypokalemia. Combined use of AC inhibitors and ARBs and potassium-sparing diuretics, risk of hypokalemia. Beta blockers and concomitant use of non-dihydropyridine calcium channel blockers, heart blocks are there. So there are drug interactions. There are some undesirable side effects. There are some combinations which we would like to avoid. So whenever we go through this prescription, we have to be very careful. Are we doing any of this prescription? Our prescription contain any of this undesirable combinations, or should we see for any particular complications whenever we prescribe these drugs? Like if we have already prescribed beta blockers, we need to see whether the heart rate is going below 60. Is there any bradycardia? So such things we should be looking at. And we know what is the treatment target. So we have confirmed diagnosis. We have documented that the person has blood pressure. So we need to know how far we should be keeping as treatment targets. So usually less than 130/80 among those less than 60 years, and less than 140/90 in those more than 60 years. And it should not be very low like 120/70. So we have to be very careful in that way too. And we need to individualize goal, especially in frail elderly, we may be keeping a slightly higher blood pressure. So this is the 2021 guideline for the pharmacological treatment of hypertension in adults. And we have Indian guidelines on hypertension 4 published in 2019. So this is the pharmacotherapy algorithm recommended for drug combinations in step care approach. So they have divided into younger and older. This A is AC inhibitors or angiotensin receptor blocker. C is calcium channel blocker. D is diuretic. B is beta blocker. We can see in the step 1, they have suggested to use an AC inhibitors or ARB. And in older patients, C or D, that is calcium channel blocker or a diuretic. But we must be very careful, the point I have emphasized. If a person is planning to become pregnant or the person is likely to be pregnant, should never start. Even if the person is younger, in females, we should not be starting AC inhibitors or ARBs. Then once we have started on either of these classes and the blood pressure is not getting controlled to the target, we can add these two. One AC inhibitors or ARBs plus calcium channel blockers or diuretic. And with this step 2 approach, if the blood pressure is not controlled, we can add the third drug. That any of these drugs, maybe patient on AC inhibitors and calcium channel blocker, we can add diuretic or the other way around. So this step 3, there are 3 drugs. One of it is a diuretic, and we have up titrated to the maximum tolerated dose of those 3 drugs. At this point, if the blood pressure is not controlled, we call it as resistant hypertension. Resistant hypertension, we can add additional drugs like spironolactone. And in step 4, if the blood pressure is not controlled, then in step 5, we can add the alpha blockers, or in special situations, clonidine, all those things we can consider at this stage. Okay, so this is the guideline that have put it that by the Indian guidelines on hypertension in 2019. And in this, what they have suggested is after initial antihypertensive drug treatment, we have started any of these drugs and we will see the blood pressure. And if the blood pressure is achieved, we can monitor this patient every 3 months. And if it is very well controlled at 6 months, low risk patient, only blood pressure is the problem. But we will be reinforcing the lifestyle modification, lifestyle measures of smoking, stopping smoking and all those things. And if possible, I advise them to continue with home blood pressure monitoring, and they can see at all points whether their blood pressure is adequately controlled. But if the goal blood pressure is not achieved after 1 month, or there is only partial response, we can up titrate as in step 2 or step 3, intensify lifestyle measures. This is also very, very important. Whenever the blood pressure is out of control, we should go back and ask the patient, was there any change in lifestyle? We have to help them to sort out the issues in lifestyle modification. And while we started this drug, we have already started antihypertensive treatment, and the patient on ACE inhibitors developing hyperkalemia or excessive cough, irritant dry cough, and we need to think whether we have to stop this drug. So then we can substitute a drug, or if there is postural hypotension, patient is not tolerating that blood pressure, we can reduce the dose or add a new drug from another class. So when there is a hypertension, we have started 3 drugs, we have added all the lifestyle modification, and still the blood pressure is not controlled. We can add alpha blocker or other drugs, or we can refer for further investigations. It is always better to refer all those resistant hypertension cases to a higher center for detailed assessment, so that we will not miss treatable causes or secondary hypertension in those patients. So this is how they have discussed. And diabetes and hypertension, we know that these are both are chronic diseases, lifelong disease. Though we say that there is reversal of diabetes, we can control blood pressure, we can even stop blood pressure if the lifestyle modification, weight loss, and things have achieved. But in these 2 diseases, the system should have a lifelong approach. Because age of the patient, age we cannot reduce by any means. So as the patient grows older, the duration of the disease, this is also, if we diagnose timely and follow up, duration also we cannot modify once it is diagnosed. So age and duration are actually non-modifiable risk factors for complications. So for the system, if we have more number of diabetic patients, more number of patients with high blood pressure, the burden increases. So this is a burden for the system. So burden increases with increase in patients. And at this point, we need to know what is the system wants, or what is our healthcare system need for this, how to tackle this. We cannot tackle it as an individual patient. We have to see what our system demands for tackling this situation. Always we need to have a patient-centered approach. Though we have algorithms, we may not follow the algorithm in specific patients. That is known as patient-centered approach. So what we need is an individualized care. The guidelines present a rational advice based on current evidences. For individual patients, we need to decide what is to be needed, what is to be done for this patient. But it is always better. The guideline says we have to use ACE inhibitor. So we can put this patient has got worsening of renal function. There is hyperkalemia, or the patient has got previous history of cough, irritant cough, suggestive of due to ACE inhibitor. I am not using this drug. So it is always better to put a note why you have not started the conventional drug in that point. That will help us not to restart again. The patient on smaller dose of beta blockers, they went into severe bradycardia or blocks. So we should be putting a note so that we will not be starting this. So this is also very important whenever we document. And the major challenges for the healthcare system are, this is the one we have been getting when we were planning to have our own guideline. These are the issues that many of the doctors, when we got the feedback, the quality of drugs were always a problem. Non-availability or interrupted supply. We will have calcium channel blockers for some time. And once we start the patient on calcium channel blocker, the next purchase, it's only ACE inhibitors, then only ARBs come. So we don't have a drug that we can ensure that there is continuous supply. Cost is always a concern. If the supply is not there, patient has to buy from outside. And no patient will buy from outside if they cannot afford. And so there is a interrupted treatment. So need to treat. The patient should understand why we are treating them. Adherence is very, very, very important in chronic diseases, especially diabetes and hypertension. They cannot take intermittent therapy. And we have to offer follow-up. We have to have monitoring for complications. and we should be able to ready for timely up titration. So all these points are very, very important when we are practicing in a healthcare setting, especially in a government healthcare system. We have to ensure all these things, and the system is actually trying for this so that we will have uninterrupted supply of telminoxate and uninterrupted supply of amlodipine so that we can ensure that the patient gets proper treatment. So I'm putting this slide again because we have to know that we should not forget the emphasis on the lifestyle modification on each visit when the patient comes to us for treatment. So we have to document the diagnosis, note down that the patient has got hypertension, and what is the blood pressure at diagnosis, what is our plan. It's a mild hypertension and patient has listed many causes for not getting the blood pressure control, and patient wants to try a lifestyle modification for 1 month. So we can note down, but if the patient has got features of target organ damage with a blood pressure more than 160 by 110, we will never allow them to go with a lifestyle modification alone because the damage has already started and any day delay might cause adverse event. So we have to tell the patient we don't want to wait for the lifestyle modification to act, but you have to continue with lifestyle modification, but we'll start the drug now itself. So that way we need to empower the patient. So this is the Government of Kerala hypertension protocol that I have projected here. So what it says, we are having a very good ambition of screening all patients over 18 years. So this is a very good project. And if we could screen all patients above 18 years, we are getting a very good opportunity to identify, diagnose at the correct point, and we can start treating. The treatment need not be drug in all patients. We can advise on lifestyle modification. So high BP means systolic blood pressure more than 140 and diastolic blood pressure more than 90 millimeters of mercury. This is about blood pressure measurement. We need to measure at least 2 readings and patient should be comfortably seated. No tea or coffee, no argument and shouting, and patient should be relaxed, and patient should be not be smoking. Patient should be having crossly seated, arms supported at the level of the heart, blood pressure instrument is well calibrated, legs not crossed, patient's back supported, and all those things we need to advise, and we need to take a proper blood pressure recording. And if there are 2 readings, and there is a gross discrepancy between the 2 readings, more than 5 millimeters of mercury also, we can take the 3rd reading, and the lowest of the 3 we can take, or we can take the average as well. So if the systolic blood pressure more than 180 and diastolic more than 110 at this point, we need to start treatment and we need to refer the patient for necessary investigations. If the blood pressure is 160 to 179 and diastolic 100 to 109, okay, that is less than 160 and 100, we have to advise the patient for on basic investigations like ECG, serum creatinine, urine albumin, advise lifestyle modification, and we can start on drug treatment. But less than 160 and less than 100. 160, 100 we know that blood pressure more than 140, 90 is the hypertension. But if it is less than 160 by 100, we can plan lifestyle modifications. Then only we need to start treatment. We can give an opportunity for the patient to undergo lifestyle modification, and then we will review. So any value more than 180 by 110, we will start treatment and we will start investigation simultaneously. Anything between 160 to 180 and 90 to 100, 110, we will also, 100 to 110, we will also initiate investigation and start treatment. But it is less than 160 by 100, we can advise them on dietary modification. And we should know how to, blood pressure is properly taken, and we should advise the lifestyle modifications. So what we do is, if the blood pressure is high, we should plan for a serum creatinine and urine protein. Very important investigation in a hypertensive patient. And our diabetes protocol also screens this patient for diabetes and start on lifestyle modifications for 3 months. Okay, except in very high blood pressure, we will advise them to go for lifestyle modification. and we will review them monthly. And after 3 months, if the patient is blood pressure is less than 140/90, we can continue with the lifestyle modification. But after 3 months, still BP is more than 140/90, we have to start amlodipine 5 milligram daily. And with amlodipine 5 milligram, we will review the patient after 1 month. Why this 1 month? By this time, we can take the blood serum creatinine, urine protein, and if available, we can do the ECG and the basic investigations like hemoglobin to rule out polycythemia. We can think of hypothyroidism, then you do TSH. All treatable causes we should identify and we could advise them. And on next visit after 1 month, we will record the blood pressure. Blood pressure less than 140/90, patient can continue on amlodipine. If more, we will start the second drug. The second drug is telmisartan 40 milligram daily. And from telmisartan, after 1 month, the patient will come back to us. BP is well maintained. We don't have to do anything. Continue amlodipine and continue telmisartan. But after 1 month, BP is still remaining uncontrolled. We can add or we can increase the telmisartan to 80 milligrams. And then follow up blood pressure control, continue the treatment. Blood pressure not controlled. After 1 month, we need to up titrate of amlodipine to 10 milligrams. So we have added amlodipine 10 milligram, telmisartan 40 milligram twice daily. And still BP remaining uncontrolled, we are going to add the third drug, and it is as per our guideline. The third drug is chlorthalidone 12.5 milligram daily, which is a diuretic. We know that chlorthalidone has got a longer duration of action compared to hydrochlorothiazide. So this way, we need to monitor the blood pressure and decide how to manage. And at any of the point, if the blood pressure remaining uncontrolled, there is no need to up titration of the drugs. So obviously, there is a question comes. This was discussed many times, and this protocol was conceptualized and released. Why? Because there were many options. Either we can start with AC or ARB, then go for the calcium channel blocker, or we can start with calcium channel blocker, then add ACI and ARB. But what we have done is we have started on amlodipine after 5 milligram. By that time, we will test whether the patient has got CKD, patient has got proteinuria, patient has got very definite indications to start AC inhibitors. On absolutely, the AC inhibitors should not be started because of hypokalemia or some other reason. So when the patient comes, BP is not controlled and all the parameters tested are within normal range, and there is no contraindication for starting an ARB, we can start ARB after amlodipine. That is telmisartan is the drug that is being included. And you can also see only very few drugs. One calcium channel blocker, that is amlodipine. One is ARB, that is telmisartan. One diuretic, that is chlorthalidone. Why this is because by taking only selected number of drugs, we can ensure that there is an uninterrupted supply of drugs available. So obviously there will be a question, why calcium channel blocker we have selected as first line? So when there is a routine evaluation in a hypertensive patient, even in resource limited situation, we need to do some basic investigations. Especially, we need to see the blood glucose, we need to see the serum potassium, we need to see the serum creatinine, we need to see the urine analysis. So without all these drugs, we cannot start any antihypertensive drug, especially AC inhibitor or ARB. So when we have a patient, we arrange for all those things. And we start the patient on amlodipine. And by the time when the patient comes, we'll have all these drugs and we can decide whether this is the right candidate for AC inhibitors or ARB. If this patient should not be given an AC inhibitor, then we will withhold the drug. So this is that is why we have started with the calcium channel blocker, that is amlodipine. So we have been discussing about how to tackle hypertension. And we have seen which are the drugs we have currently available in the armamentarium. And we have also discussed which drug are to be used. Are there any selective contraindications for some drugs? Are there any selective compelling indications for some drugs? And what are the common side effects that we will be monitoring? And what are the current guidelines that says? And what is the state protocol says? All these we have been looking into. We have not discussed about hypertension emergency, that is uncontrolled high blood pressure with target organ damage like heart failure, stroke, or ischemic. heart disease or CKD, or hypertension with no target organ damage, we call it as hypertensive urgency. And hypertension in pregnancy, actually, it is different. We need to have very close monitoring to identify pre-gestational hypertension. That is, patient is already having hypertension at the time patient conceived, and we also have to know that patients more than 20 weeks of pregnancy detected to have hypertension, we call it as gestational hypertension. And the diagnosis is important and the cutoffs are slightly different. So all these things we have to understand. But our purpose of today's session is primarily how to initiate treatment and how to start treatment. And my point is we have to individualize care. Though the guideline says we need to give all these things, but the patient strongly says he has this problem and he cannot be started on these steps. We can have an alternative approach, individualizing care, but this has to be documented very clearly, especially when you are moving away from the guideline. And we know that all these patients, aspirin is not used as a primary prevention drug, but cholesterol management, dyslipidemia management is very important in all these patients. We have to exclude secondary causes. We need to do the lifestyle modification, high fiber diet, and intensify lifestyle therapy, optimize glycemic control, and control blood pressure. All these things are very relevant in patients with hypertension, and what we call it as a approach, that is a multidisciplinary team approach is needed in such situations. And this is something we know that patient has an underlying severe cardiovascular disease risk, we go for a high risk, but all other situations we can start with a moderated intensity statin therapy. So I will be taking you through the guidelines, which are the drugs currently available and what we have been planned in our guidelines.